Last time we talked about how Brazil's controversial Amazon bill could ripple into the American economy through trade, supply chains, and environmental costs that don't stay in one place. But this week, we're turning inward. We're looking at America's debt spiral, a creeping crisis that's quietly overtaking our economy, our policy priorities, and our future. It's not on your TikTok feed, it's not trending on Twitter, but it is reshaping everything from housing to education to disaster. This is the story of budget dysfunction, ballooning interest payments, and the unseen victims who get cut first when the belt tightens. So let's take a sideways look. As of mid 2025, the US national debt has surpassed 35 trillion. But that's not the most shocking number. It's the 749 billion in interest payments we've already made this fiscal year. That's more than what we spend on Medicaid or education. And we're not done yet. To put it simply, we're paying rent on past decisions, and it's crowding out our future. Imagine trying to pay off your student loans, your mortgage, or your credit cards, and every month all you can afford is the interest. So, why is no one talking about this? Because debt is abstract. It's a number on a screen. And unlike gas prices or layoffs, you don't feel it right away. But you do feel it when your neighborhood clinic shuts down, or when your child's public school loses its music programs, or they're no longer offering free lunches. Perhaps, or when FEMA delays disaster funds because the federal budget is in gridlock. Let's break it down. What does this mean for everyday folks? Let's look at social services. Debt eats the budget. Bottom line, that just means that programs like Head Start, food assistance, and Section 8 housing are on the chopping block. But not because they're not working, but because they don't scream politically. What about local governments? What are they doing? What happens when the feds pull back? Cities, counties, towns, villages have to stretch thin. That basically means fewer mental health workers, slower emergency responses, and crumbling infrastructure. What about the generational crisis, that chaos? What happens to the young people? Young people, many of whom are already strapped with personal debt. Some mostly inherited from the federal budget itself, with no flexibility. That makes progressive investments in climate resilience, universal childcare, and student debt even harder to get relief. So, who's benefiting from this chaos, you might ask? Now, let's ask the sideways question basically. Who's benefited from this spiral? Spoiler alert, it's not working families. Maybe defense contractors who keep getting full funding with little accountability. Big lenders, banks, they're racking in the profits. Private equity groups, it's probably them offering solutions often at a cost. What about lobbyists? Oh, they love budget dysfunctions because when nobody's watching the system, all they can do is carve out basic tax breaks, big, beautiful bills, all for the wealthy. So you may want to ask, how did we get here? This didn't happen overnight. Certainly. This is decades of tax cuts, particularly from corporations and wealthy people combined. You see, folks, the math doesn't lie. And yet, every time someone proposes new revenue, whether it's closing tax loopholes or implementing wealth taxes, it's labeled as radical. But what's really radical? It's spending almost $1 trillion not on services, not on programs, but on interest payments to creditors. Maybe we should try what other countries have tried or have done. Their models, countries like Norway or Germany, they have experimented with sovereign wealth funds. They have fiscal rules and long-term social investments that will be able to pay off debts over decades. Even Canada have managed its debt by the GDP ratio with more discipline in place without gutting its safety net. Maybe we should try that. So why aren't we trying those models, those experiments? Because in America, we've prioritized performative governance over what? Debt isn't inherently bad. But how we manage it and who pays the price is a policy choice. So what do we need to do? We need to have honest conversations about trade-offs. Smarter budgeting rooted in equity. Real accountability from legislatures on both sides of the aisles. And yes, public pressure from informed citizens like you and I. Folks, this is a crisis in slow motion. And like climate change, by the time it feels urgent, it may be too late to act. But if we look now, especially if we look sideways and closer, we might still steer the ship. Thanks for joining me today on Sideways Look, looking where others don't. I am Dr. Paul. See you on the next side.